All right, welcome everyone to today's explainer. Whether you're a B.Pharm or Pharm.D student, or maybe you're gearing up for your GPAT exams, I am absolutely thrilled to have you here. Today, we're unpacking a true foundational pillar of pharmacology, the bioassay and the dose-response relationship. You know, in an era where modern drug development relies so heavily on advanced analytical chemistry, it might actually surprise you just how much we still depend on living biological systems to truly understand what a drug does. We're going to break down the exact principles, the laboratory setups, and the calculations that make this science absolutely critical. Okay, let's dive right into our syllabus. We'll be walking through 1. Foundations of bioassay, 2. Principles and dose response, 3. The experimental setup, 4. Quantal methods, 5. Graded methods, and then wrapping up with 6. Summary and applications. Kicking things off with Section 1, Foundations of Bioassay. Let's set a really strong academic foundation right from the start. So I want you to think about this for a second. How do we actually measure a drug's potency when we don't even know its exact chemical structure? Or what if the chemistry is just so complex that standard laboratory assays completely fail us? I mean, chemistry is incredibly powerful for sure, but it definitely has its limitations. And that is exactly where pharmacology steps in to bridge that gap. Which brings us to a really crucial definition. A bioassay or biological assay is basically the estimation of the potency, concentration, or activity of a drug by measuring its biological response on a living biological system. And here's the key. We always do this in comparison with a standard preparation. It all boils down to the law of mass action applied biologically. Essentially, the magnitude of the response is directly proportional to the dose. But to do this, we literally have to use living systems. Now, this could be in vitro, using isolated tissues like a guinea pig ileum, or a frog rectus abdominis muscle, or in vivo, using whole living animals like mice, rats, or rabbits. Now, you might be wondering why go through all the trouble of using living tissues? Well, sometimes chemical assays are just way too complex or honestly totally unavailable. In other scenarios, they're just completely insensitive to low doses. Take histamine, for example. We bioassay it in microgram concentrations. That is often way too small for basic chemical detection to even pick up. In other cases, the active principle is simply a mystery, like with insulin or posterior pituitary extracts. Or we could be dealing with variable chemical compositions that still produce the exact same action, like cardiac glycosides. So in all of these cases, biological testing isn't just a nice to have, it's absolutely mandatory. Okay, definitely take close notes here because this is a classic exam question. We divide bioassays into two main types, qualitative and quantitative. A qualitative bioassay is essentially a yes or no test. It's looking for an all or none response, just to see if a specific pharmacological activity is present or absent. It doesn't give us a dose-response relationship. It's strictly used for screening or identifying the type of action. On the flip side, a quantitative bioassay is all about precise measurement. Here, the response is graded, meaning we actually measure the magnitude of the response and construct a dose-response curve. This is what allows us to compare our unknown sample to a known standard and calculate those really vital stats like the ED50 or LD50. Moving right along to Section 2, Principles and Dose Response. With those definitions locked in, let's transition into the core theory and check out the graphical data that really anchors this whole science. Now, what's really interesting here is that classic sigmoid or S-shaped curve. Down on the horizontal axis, we've got the log dose or concentration, and on the vertical axis, the biological response. Notice how the curve starts out completely flat? That's the threshold, literally the absolute minimum dose required to see any response at all. But then it climbs really steeply in a linear fashion, and this linear portion is the sweet spot. It's where our bioassays are the most sensitive and accurate. Finally, it completely flattens out at the top, reaching the maximum response, or Emax. And right smack in the middle of that linear climb, that is your EC50, the exact concentration that produces 50% of that maximum response. Let's build on that and clear up two terms that get confused all the time: efficacy and potency. Thinking about efficacy, that's your vertical height, the absolute maximum ceiling effect a drug can achieve, or 100% response. You can have different drugs with totally different efficacies, but if these start their climb at the same horizontal point, they actually share the same affinity, or EC50. Now, thinking about potency, imagine several drugs all reaching that exact same top height, so equal efficacy, but their curves are shifted horizontally. The one shifted furthest to the left? That one has the highest potency.
Why? Because it requires a much lower EC50 to achieve that exact same 50% response. Just remember, efficacy is about how high that curve goes. Potency is about how far left it sits.
All right, Section 3, the experimental setup. Theory is great, right? But pharmacology is a highly hands-on science. Let's mentally shift out of the textbook and step right into the practical laboratory environment. I want you to imagine you're standing right in front of the lab bench. Here's a classic setup for a graded bioassay of histamine using an isolated guinea pig ileum. Over to one side, you have the organ bath assembly. This brilliant piece of kit keeps the isolated living tissue perfectly alive in a physiological salt solution at a strictly controlled temperature, constantly bubbled with oxygen. Now, physically attached to that tissue is a lever system, and that connects to a chymograph, that slowly rotating drum. When we inject a specific dose of our drug into that organ bath, the tissue physically contracts. That contraction pulls the lever, and a pen beautifully traces that exact response as a peak on the chymograph paper. It's literally a direct visualization of a biological response unfolding right in front of you. Moving into Section 4, Quantal Bioassay methods. Now that we're familiar with the tools, let's actually look at how we use them, starting with our first specific methodology. So Quantal Bioassays are direct methods based entirely on that all-or-none response we talked about. Classic textbook examples include infusing an extract of digitalis into a guinea pig or cat until cardiac arrest occurs, or maybe injecting insulin into mice to observe hypoglycemic convulsions. We also use this exact method to calculate the LD50, the median lethal dose. The huge advantage here is that the drug effects appear super rapidly, and honestly, the endpoints, like a convulsion or cardiac arrest, are virtually impossible to miss. But there's a catch. The major disadvantage is that this is really only useful for toxicity or high-dose studies. You simply cannot do those highly precise graded dose-ranging studies with this particular method. Which brings us right to Section 5, Graded Bioassay Methods. Because of those limitations with quantal testing, whenever we need precise pharmacological estimations, we turn to graded methods. In a graded bioassay, the response is measured on a continuous sliding scale. The simplest form of this is the matching bioassay. When you look at a tracing for this, here's what's happening. First, we administer known standard doses to establish exactly how sensitive the tissue is. Then, we take our unknown test solution and see how high its response peak is. Finally, we literally just go back and do trial and error to find a known standard dose that produces that exact same peak height, effectively matching it. So if an 8 microgram standard dose perfectly matches a 4 millimeter test dose, you just divide 8 by 4 to figure out your unknown concentration is 2 micrograms per milliliter. It's super straightforward, but yeah, it relies heavily on trial and error. And this brilliantly illustrates why we have a much more robust technique, the bracketing bioassay. Instead of endlessly hunting for a perfect match, we wedge or bracket our unknown test response right between two known standard doses. We pick a lower standard dose, which we call S1, and a higher standard dose, S2. The process goes, give S1, wash the tissue, give the test dose, wash, and then give S2. The goal is to make sure the test response height sits squarely between the response heights of S1 and S2. This guarantees we are operating right on that most sensitive, linear part of the dose-response curve, completely steering clear of those insensitive, flat plateau regions. Next up is the interpolation method. This one is highly graphical and incredibly accurate. First, we run multiple submaximal standard doses on the tissue to generate a nice series of increasing peaks. We then plot those peak heights against the log dose to build a standard log dose response curve. Once that curve is locked in, we administer our unknown test drug and just record its response height. Finally, we go to our plotted graph, find that exact response height on the vertical axis, draw a horizontal line right over to our curve, and drop straight down to the horizontal axis to read the exact interpolated potency of the unknown drug. It's a really elegant solution. But for the absolute ultimate in statistical accuracy, we rely on multiple point bioassays, with the 3-point bioassay being a massive cornerstone. This method uses two standard doses, S1 and S2, typically in a 1:2 ratio, and one test dose, T. Now, to eliminate biological variation and tissue fatigue, you don't just run these once. You actually have to record them in a very specific sequence. For everyone taking notes right now, definitely memorize the sequence for your exams. S1, T, S2, S2, S1, T, T, S1, S2.
Using this precise randomized block design ensures maximum reproducibility and equips you with statistically rock-solid data.
All right, Section 6, Summary and Applications. We have covered a massive amount of ground today, from the math to the chymograph drum. Let's bring this all home and look at why this actually matters in the big picture.
So why do we still perform these bioassays today in the age of supercomputers? Because they remain the ultimate test of true biological activity. Bioassays are absolutely essential for estimating drug potency and for screening entirely new agents that we isolate from plants or synthesize in labs. They actively help medicinal chemists establish structure-activity relationships, or SAR, design much better drugs. And they're even crucial way outside the pharmacy, being used to monitor toxic environmental pollutants. Ultimately, whether we're trying to figure out the therapeutic advantage of a brand new cardiac drug or just studying newly discovered hormonal control systems, bioassays prove what a chemical actually does when it meets biology. Which leaves us with a truly fascinating question to ponder. As we discover more chemically complex biologics, like monoclonal antibodies and advanced gene therapies, how will these foundational bioassay principles evolve to test the medicines of tomorrow? The tools are definitely going to become more microscopic, but that core principle of measuring a living biological response, that will absolutely remain essential. Thank you so much for tuning in. If this explainer helped you understand bioassays and the dose-response relationship, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more pharmacology lectures. Keep up the great studying, and I'll see you in the next one.